Yeah, it's pretty big, man. Yeah, I agree. It's out of my league. Huh? This is out of my league. Here at Grand Rapids Bike Park, which is a really cool pump track and some mountain biking trails, but it features a lot of jumps, pumps. It's right next to a highway, and there's actually a lot of steel I-beam skinnies here, including a few steel I-beam skinnies to drops. I brought my unicycle with me. Danny and I are here to try to figure out if these mountain biking trails are any good for unicycling trails, especially because the whole trail system is like less than a mile long, and it's really flat. So we'll see how it goes.
Immediately from the parking lot, the trail starts and splits. On the right is the trail's biggest feature, the exposed I-beam skinny gap drop that you saw in the beginning. But we decided to first start off with these small pumps. Typically on a bike you can use the speed to hit these lips and clear the gap, but my unicycle doesn't coast. So it took me a couple tries to build up the speed to clear the 2-foot gap. Also, notice how my crank is parallel to the ground by the time I reach the lip of the jump. This is not a coincidence, and we'll talk about it later in the video. You continue on this small stretch of uneventful trail until you get to this other I-beam and bypass. Being so close to the ground, it was low risk enough that I could ride it blind while holding my camera. Immediately after, there was a tiny split where you can go right and take this mini jump, or go wide left, which sets you up for this cement block drop, which had a pseudo cement landing. This cement incline landing made it really low risk and accessible to try a few different things on. You can simply roll down the drop, you can try to jump it, you can even try and clear the cement block and gap to dirt, which I was unsuccessful at.
I want to see if I can clear this cement slab to like here, clear to dirt.
I guess I did it barely. The next section comes up pretty quickly. It's a small uphill into yet another I-beam, this time more elevated to a small drop and a rock armored downhill. Something to note about
Steel I-beam skinnies, they're not really all that skinny. I mean,
each skinny surface was roughly the same, about 1.5 feet wide. This is probably a challenge for bicycles since you have to control 2 wheels, but I would figure it's less of a challenge on a unicycle since you're only controlling 1 wheel, and a key part of unicycling is balance. It's sort of our bread and butter. This might be the one and only bike feature that's easier on a unicycle, given you already know how to ride a unicycle and you're out in the trails looking for more of a challenge.
I've been out here for like 2 hours or so. The trail is only about a mile long, but I've made it maybe 100 meters. So I can imagine how much more time I can spend here. Let's see how far I can get before I have to go pick up my wife. And let's not go too crazy because this is the first ride of my season.
That the brothers on the rise now. Endless celebrations all in my house. Levitating now, I'm super duper fly now. London boy, but DC where I reside now. Put the time in while you always yelling time out.
After the pump strip came this quick berm and a gap which contained no significant drops like the other main features to this point.
So gaps like this without a significant drop are a lot more difficult on a unicycle than a mountain bike, mostly because unicycle you can't get as much speed. What you really have to rely on is your jumping power to get you airborne to clear the gap if you don't have a drop. Like I said in my how-to jumping video, your crank has to be parallel for you to be most efficient when jumping. So you have to almost time where your crank is going to be when you want to jump on the lip. Otherwise, you're going to be jumping at a very inefficient position and you're not going to get as airborne, and therefore you might not clear the gap. So yeah, jumping on a unicycle like this is a little bit more difficult than jumping on a bike, but let's see if we can pull this one off.
Essentially what I did was put my unicycle with crank horizontal on the lip of the jump and then walk it back to wherever I was going to start from, making sure the tire was rolling on the ground so the pedals moved. From there, I knew that if I just pedaled normally, the crank would end up being horizontal by the time I got to the edge of the jump, and I could be at the most efficient place and position to make the gap.
Oh, ow! My ankle.
I guess I did clear it.
I landed right about here and not on the landing, so I got bucked a little bit, but let's try this again. I'm glad nobody's on the trail today because Candy has zoomies, and otherwise it'd be so burdensome to other riders.
Continuing on the trail, we found more I-beams and the 5 meters of elevation we were promised. We were able to complete the entire loop, which brings us back to the start, which is where the one feature that was out of my league was. Aside from fear, the 3 things holding me back were: 1, the I-beam was so long it might have been difficult to measure out a consistent mark to start from, so my crank was horizontal at takeoff, especially since I needed a good jump to clear the gap. 2, if my measurement wasn't perfect and I had to abort, I'm so exposed I had to expertly dismount backwards on a 1.5 foot wide of I-beam, or fall over the side. And the graffiti explicitly told me not to fall. I couldn't really do run-ups because of this either. And lastly, the landing was so steep, which is a whole nother video on why that's a problem.
This one is not happening for me today. Drop is just out of my league, but it'll give me something to look forward to when I come back.
Candy, you look like a leopard. You're so dirty. Trying this mountain biking trail on a unicycle wasn't all too difficult. The I-beam skinnies were unique to this system and probably the only feature that I can think of that might be easier on a unicycle compared to a bike, but it's still a challenge as I fell off a couple times. You don't have to worry about your trail wheel when riding a unicycle since you don't really have one. If nothing else, it was pretty daunting being so exposed and not having the feeling of controlling movement with handlebars. The other features that looked a little different on a unicycle were those jumps and gaps that utilize a lip to get a boost. Unicycles can't coast, so you can't pick up speed without pedaling and continuing to pedal. Plus, you should probably measure out your jumps so you can get the most efficient crank position when trying to clear a gap. But some of those jumps were just tabletop, so you can just easily ride over them. Overall, I enjoyed how flat and short it was, even though I spent the whole afternoon out there. Let me know what your thoughts are about the trail, and consider subscribing if you want more videos about how to approach biking features on a unicycle. Thanks and good luck.
Hey, come on. Here.